Our final speaker today is GT Laborde. We have talked about a lot of things. We haven't really talked about scaling, long-term vision, exit strategies, a lot of these things that you guys probably are already thinking about. If you're not, you probably should be. But GT is going to come and address that for us today. He is a Birmingham-based entrepreneur, venture investor, and educator. He was co-founder of MedMined and served as CEO from startup through its sale to Cardinal Health in 2006 for more than $100 million in total consideration. He is currently an operating consultant with Eastside Partners, Huntsville venture capital fund. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Business, and GT serves on the board of directors at Hygia Health Services and on the executive committee for TechBirmingham. So this is a busy guy. GT, thanks so much for your time. Please welcome GT Laborde.
You know, amazingly, I've had time now to start another company, or at least work on a new startup. So somehow I find time for a little bit of everything there. Well, it's tough to follow that act and this group of speakers. What a tremendous day. I've learned a lot. A couple of things I want you to know. Firstly, we really care about you. I don't know if that's sort of implicit in all of these founders today that have come up and shared their stories with you and shared their insights with you. But there's something kind of weird about entrepreneurs. We're a little bit different. We're very hopeful. We're very positive. We want the best. We want our own company to succeed. But there's something about the struggle that we're all engaged in that we want other people. We empathize with other people who are also in that struggle. And so while those of us that have had the luck, that have had some success, there's something about us that we really want to see you succeed too. And so I hope you know that the support of the folks on this stage and of others in this community that are here as well to support this entrepreneurial ecosystem we're building here, it doesn't end with this conference. I do a lot of mentoring. I'm on all kinds of you've heard the EAP, the Entrepreneur Accelerator Program. It's a great program. I mentor there. There are a lot of things. I know a lot of other folks here who I've seen throughout the program will meet individually with entrepreneurs. I mean, I've had tons of coffees talking about business plans and strategy and those kinds of things. So please know that those resources in this community exist. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. In fact, I'm having coffee tomorrow morning with someone just like that who's not here. So we do that kind of thing all the time. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask one of us for that kind of help. I think you'll find a willing hand because of the way that we kind of view other people in the same struggle that we've been going through and are going through ourselves. Second thing I want to that impressed me about today is how frequently speaker after speaker would come up and say, "Gosh, the last person sort of stole my notes." Isn't that interesting? What I kind of sense from that is that this entrepreneurship thing, it's a craft. You know, it's an art, and there's I think a reason why you're seeing these folks that have had some success in this craft have the same sort of principles. They have the same sort of ideals. They have the same bits of advice to you. I don't think that's a coincidence that it's that way. And so I think you have to study this craft. You know, when you start a business, you're spending all this time and energy focused on whatever product or service that you're bringing to the market, but you have to allow yourself also some time to learn about and study and continue to get smarter about the craft of building a business. So for me, that practically means, you know, I'll read the Wall Street Journal every morning. I read Harvard Business Review every month. These are kind of periodicals, sources of information that kind of help me learn about the general business world, about strategies, about all kinds of things in the craft of learning and growing a business. I'm going to a sales seminar, a Miller Heiman sales seminar in Atlanta a couple of weeks from now. So constantly trying to find sources of information that help you improve the craft of building a business in addition to understanding your subject matter, building your product, building your service. Next thing I would say is I hope that, or want to challenge you to dare to be big. It's I think a place where a lot of most statistics will show that most entrepreneurial companies stay small. They're one or two or several people. Very few companies, percentage-wise, ever get above 10 people or even 100 people. It's a surprisingly small percentage of companies that ever grow to be that big. I think because while it is a risk to be an entrepreneur, let's face it, a lot of society is finding a lot of value in an entrepreneur. It's exciting to tell people you started a company, you've got this idea for a company. You may even be in an incubator or a fairly cheap office or in your house or something. It's exciting to tell people about your venture, so you get a lot of positive feedback. But I'm going to challenge you because I think you're in kind of a safe place when that's where you are. It's the promise of what you could be. And it's always exciting to be the promise of what could be. The scary part is when you say, okay, I'm gonna do this thing and I'm gonna commit to doing it in a big way. I might even bring on outside investors to help me with it. I might even recruit talent, other people away from their jobs, and they're gonna help me reach the next level. So that's a scary thing to do. You become very vulnerable. When you fail there, you're going to fail big. You're going to lose other people's money. People who left a job somewhere else, you've cost them a career, part of their career path by recruiting them away. So it's a pretty scary and vulnerable place to be. Let's just acknowledge that, and I guess as the old adage goes, sort of feel the fear and do it anyway kind of a thing. I would encourage you to think big and have the courage to be vulnerable enough to do that big thing, to try to grow and be big. The corollary of my life is I decided one day that I was going to run a marathon. We used to, at MedMined, we used to have teams of people that ran the Mercedes Marathon, the team event. And I read a book about how to run a marathon, people that have never run one before. And the very first page in the book was, tell everybody you know that you're going to run a marathon. Because once you were out there, it was hard to pull that back at that point. Everybody sort of expected you to do that. And I kind of feel like when you take that step to scale your business, you say, okay, it's time to really raise outside capital, recruit other people. It's kind of like, it's for real now. It's not just me on the back porch, or it's not just me in a business incubator, or me and my friend or something. We're going big time, and we're willing to do that. It's a scary thing, but have the courage to do that. It's an exciting process. Last thing, or I guess on the subject about scaling and about growing and about exiting your business, it sounds weird that we're here talking about sort of a startup summit or an entrepreneurial summit, and we want to think about actually selling your business. I don't know how many of you folks are at the point where you're thinking about exiting, like I'm ready to get out. Funny, the day that, or around the time that we sold MedMined, we got a nice payoff for that. And the most common question I got from everybody was, did you ever think it was going to be that big? What do you think my answer to that was? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And so when thinking about ending it or exiting your company or what the end result looks like, I don't think you get there by accident. I think you get there on purpose. And you get there on purpose because you have a vision in the beginning of exactly what you want out of your company. So my first kind of bit of advice about exiting or growing or scaling is not only have a goal, but make that goal as specific as possible. I think that businesses are a means to an end. I mean, we really didn't start MedMined to be this thing was going to be a social whatever, I mean, it's great that the company did something. It tracked hospital-acquired infections and prevented people from getting infections in the hospital. That was a wonderful thing. We all felt great about it, but at the end of the day, it was a business. And we had a very specific personal goal out of the business. And so I often ask entrepreneurs, well, tell me what your goal is for running this business. What do you want out of it? And they're like, well, I want it to be successful, and I want to make some money. And it's like, no. Tell me specifically, what do you want this business to do for your life? I mean, do you want your grandkids to work there, or do you want to sell it for $100 million? Because the business that you build is going to be a radically different business depending on those two goals. Now, both of those goals are laudable goals. I mean, either one would be great, but let's face it, you're going to make choices as you go to scale your company and you think about what verticals you might go in or what strategies you might employ. It's going to be a very different choices you make, whether you want your grandkid to work at your business or whether you're looking to sell it within 5 years or 10 years or something like that. Someone refers to these, Red recently referred to these as SMART goals. So they're specific and they're measurable and they're time-bound, etc. So they're very specific time-bound goals. The more specific you can get about what goal you want, what you want this business to do for your life, the better able you'll be to kind of chart a path to get you to where you want to be. Second thing about growing and scaling a business and thinking about selling it one day is that at some point you have to start thinking about the business having value without you in it. And that's hard to do, right? This is your baby. You've built this thing. You know, it's your passion. You continue to control the culture there and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, somebody is going to acquire it, and if they make you wealthy, they know the odds are that you're not going to stay there for very long. You might stay there a year or two or something like that, but you're not going to be a long-term solution to running this business. So you have to kind of purposely think about, how do I build systems and people and get the right managers in place and the right processes so that this thing is valuable without the founders involved in it. Because they're going to value the business that way. So you might as well think about it ahead of time so that you can build that asset that has value without you there. Because that's what they're going to do. You know, it causes some people wonder, like, oh, you know, how do big companies measure the value, or how do they come up with a valuation at which they're going to buy a company? And it's really quite simple. You know, there are all these metrics about multiples on sales or multiples on earnings and all these complicated formulas. But it really comes down to cash flow. It's pretty simple, actually. It's like, if I told you I was going to give you $1 in an investment, well, guess what? I want more than my $1 back if I'm investing in you, right? And I don't want it back, like, I don't want $1.10 back like 20 years from now, right? I want it fast, and I want a lot back. It's pretty simple. Like, we sort of learn these investment principles in kindergarten, I think. I mean, it's no different when you think about how a big company looks at acquiring a smaller company. They're interested in how much cash flow can this company produce for us over a certain time frame, say maybe 10 years, and how does that compare with the cost of us acquiring that cash? So there's something they all have, it's called the cost of capital, and whether that big company is funded by debts or whether it's funded by equity, they know sort of how much that money costs them, and they're looking to make a return out of buying you, and the cash flow that your business generates to them that exceeds their cost of their capital. That's a good use of their capital. So you have to, I'm just getting you to think about, how do they think about acquiring? You have to think about, well, how do I generate the most amount of cash for another company that might acquire me, and when is the optimum time to do that? Now, is the optimum time to do that once you've grown, and then you're plateauing and your things are slowing down? Is that the right time to do that? No, not so much. Because what do you want to sell? That story like, oh, we're growing, and we have lots of growing to do. So it makes sense that you would pay a large multiple of what our sales are, or a large multiple of earnings, because we have a fair amount of runway to go where this business is still going to continue growing very fast. Does that make sense? So you want to be able to tell that story. So sometimes people ask me, what's the right time to think about starting to exit? It is when you can sell the best story, and that you can sell that story will continue without you and for some time after you leave. Long enough that you can kind of generate that return for the big company, the return of their cash flow. Second last thing is you want to create, I mean, what's the ideal scenario when you think about, well, the business that you want to sell? What's the ideal scenario? The ideal scenario is you have all these suitors, they love what you do, and there's a bidding war, right? They're so excited about you that multiple companies are bidding on you and are raising up the price, and it's a frenzy, it's a feeding frenzy, and you get to benefit from the increase in that value. Well, how do you get there? You don't get there overnight. It doesn't happen by chance. I submit to you that you have to work on that. You have to start thinking a long time ahead of when you might exit. As you're scaling your business, start thinking about who are the potential acquirers in this space, what kinds of companies do they buy, what kinds of companies might I want to work for a year if I have to stay there after for a while, and how do I build relationships with them that get multiple parties at the table who already know us, who already like us, who already see the value in us, and are bidding on us, are kind of competing with each other. How do you set that up? Now at MedMined, that sort of played out in a few ways. The company that ultimately bought us, Cardinal Health, I met my future boss 2.5 years prior to the acquisition. So we actually talked and worked together and formed a business relationship, formed a partnership, and did some things together in a particular state with hospitals and helping them out and servicing them. We worked together for 2.5 years before they made an offer to acquire the company. At the same time, we very purposely partnered with 3M, with Cerner, and with another French company called bioMérieux that made laboratory reagents and laboratory tests. Why do we purposely chose a portfolio of non-competitive companies who all acquire other companies and who were known to pay fair value for other companies? We did that very purposefully so we could build relationships with all these guys so that we could create the bidding war that we ultimately wanted to benefit from. So it doesn't happen overnight. That kind of bidding war doesn't happen by accident. You basically have to know where you're headed and work your way to that place by kind of purposely setting up the scenario ahead of time to get you to that place. Last thing is what gives you the power to extract all this value when you sell your company? It comes down to something I read about. There was an article in Harvard Business Review once that described this term called BATNA. And BATNA means the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So power in a negotiation is always your ability to say no. And this is true in every negotiation. I mean, I now have a 3-year-old, and so this thing is getting tested quite a lot in terms of what the BATNA. She was screaming about something this morning, so I know all about BATNA from her. But it all comes down to have you set yourself up so that you can say no until the right deal comes along. I'll never forget, the time that my partners and I we got taken out by Cardinals. The first trip down where they kind of gave us a formal offer, went out to dinner at Daniel George, or sitting in the back room, and my partners and I still owned. We'd only done one round of venture capital funding, and so we still owned a pretty big percentage of the company. We got an offer that night to buy the company for $78 million. And we said no. How in the world? I mean, that's a life-changing kind of scenario. But we said no. 2 things allowed us to say no. Number one, when we started the company, and the whole time we said we want to sell the company for $100 million. That's our number. Don't ask me where, it was a round number. It sounded good. That's where we got it from. But we very specifically, we had a specific target in mind, and that allowed us to say no. What also allowed us to say no is that we had kind of formulated, we built the company, we made strategic decisions in the company such that at the time, we were making something like $400,000 a month. So we could say no. And what we said was, look, if we're not at a size yet that it's worth that much money to you to buy us, no problem. We're going to keep growing. We love what we do. We're going gangbusters. We grew 250% last year. We're making 25% net margins. We're happy. We don't need to sell. Just call us back when you think we're worth $100 million. Now the phone rang like 3 days later, and they offered like $80 million or $85 million, I think it was, something like that. We said no. The number's 100. Let us know when we get there. So it all comes down to, are you in a place, have you kind of formulated yourself, and you got your company in a place where you can say no because you're in an enviable position, you're growing, you're making money, you're happy, you're enjoying what you're doing, so that you have the BATNA, you have a good alternative to a negotiated settlement. That's all I have for you today. Look, I hope you're able to kind of suck up all this wonderful advice. I'm going to stop so we can have more time for Q&A. I've got lots of, I'd love to get to some of your questions, so let's do that. Thank you.